Welcome to those who are coming in. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just pushing a few more buttons and we'll get to it. There's still time to invite people. So if there is a friend, family member, neighbor, coworker, whoever you talk to about this, you want to give them a text to remind them that it's starting, now would be a great time to do it. So glad that you're here. Let's see what buttons I pushed. Oh, let's see. I think that worked. Let's see. That's exciting. It did work. Amazing. You'd think after all these years, guys, I'd be less excited that this works. But when it works, I'm excited. So, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Offense and Defense, How to Defeat Trump MAGA Fascism and Defend Those Under Attack. It's a virtual forum and live episode of the Refuse Fascism podcast. The Refuse Fascism podcast is a podcast brought to you by volunteers. I'm Sam Goldman, one of those volunteers and host of the show and host of tonight's program. Refuse Fascism leads people to understand and resist Trump MAGA fascism, Through our podcast and other public programs, we expose and analyze the threat we face, promote efforts to defend people targeted by the fascists, and most essentially, challenge and inspire the non-fascist majority of people living in the United States to break out of the deadly confines of politics as usual and engage in determined, defiant collective action to defeat Trump MAGA fascism. I hope that you're ready to hear some prescient insights from people who have been leading serious efforts to expose and oppose Trump MAGA fascism, illuminating the threats we face and the paths forward to resist them effectively. Tonight, I'll be talking with Coco Das of the Refuse Fascism Editorial Board and Sansara Taylor, co-host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Faisal Al-Jubrari, Chief External Affairs Officer for Raices, was scheduled to join, but unfortunately has become quite sick. We wish him a speedy recovery and are looking forward to a future program with him when he is well. You can hear him on previous episodes of the podcast, including his latest appearance in episode 185. Whether you're joining us on Zoom or YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, maybe it's up on my TikTok, I pushed a button, I don't know. We are so glad to have you with us, eager to hear your input, and hope you can share this conversation with everyone you know. So there's a Q&A button if you want to send us questions. We'd love to hear from them if you're tuning in via Zoom. And if you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the other places, you can comment and feed your questions in that way. So we have to talk about reality. Trump will retake the reins of power in just 5 days. Fascists will be leading the most dangerous, the most powerful country in the world. Yes, fascists. Fascism is not just the worst of all insults you can sling, the worst policy you can think of, or even a gross combination of all the horrific reactionary shit. It's a qualitative change in how society is governed, how it's ruled. Fascism foments, stirs up, and relies on America First xenophobia, white supremacy, misogyny, and aggressive reassertion of male supremacy and patriarchal oppression of LGBTQ plus people. Fascist mobs and threats of violence are unleashed to build this movement and consolidate power. What's key is that once in power, fascism essentially eliminates traditional democratic rights. Fascism has direction and momentum. Dissent is piece by piece criminalized. The truth is bludgeoned. Group after group is demonized and targeted along a trajectory that leads to real horrors. And let's be real, this has already made huge advances when Trump was in power the first time. History has shown that fascism must be stopped before it becomes too late. So together tonight, we're confronting Trump MAGA fascism 2.0. now backed by all three branches of government, a united and far-reaching fascist movement both in and out of power. Project 2025, a fascist blueprint. The Republican Party purged of any dissent, vowing retribution against anyone who has opposed it, anyone who opposes it. And a cabinet ready to go, full of woman haters, theocrats, immigrant bashers, war criminals, science deniers, climate destroyers, racists, and shameless liars with no respect for the rule of law. In the days before the inauguration, we are seeing the horror of Trump's cabinet picks, seeming to glide through the confirmation process, facing superficial pro forma questioning from Democrats with a united Republican caucus in lockstep behind the MAGA program. Incoming border czar Tom Homan already announcing plans for large internment camps, misleadingly called family facilities, to expedite their plans for mass deportations. The Jack Smith report that didn't see the light of day until a mere week before the inauguration and begs the question, why the fuck hasn't this fascist been prosecuted and jailed years ago? And what kind of system perpetuates this? We're seeing ICE shake off their extremely loose chains to tear apart communities in Central California. We've seen the new MAGA-dominated House and Senate, with cooperation from the Democratic Party, advance the Laken Riley Act, the most dangerous anti-immigrant legislation yet. We detailed some of it in our latest mini episode. Trump and the Republic fascists are moving quickly to remake all of government and all of society. Now, for anyone and everyone with a heart who knows that now isn't a time for turning inward or tuning out, the question is, how do we stop this regime that imperils humanity and the planet itself? Can we even do that? What does refusing fascism mean? And for anyone who doesn't have their head completely up their ass, it's abundantly clear that this will not be stopped by the courts Trump stacked, and which very directly enabled his return to power, by the supposed opposition of the Democrats, who are in fact ever more openly facilitating this fascist transformation, or by the supposed norms and rules and other institutions of this venerated American democracy, which have in fact provided so many of the tools for fascist takeover. So what do we do? With that, I'm glad to welcome Coco Das, member of the Refuse Fascism editorial board and frequent guest and guest host of the Refuse Fascism podcast, along with Sunsara Taylor, co-host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. She brings a revolutionary perspective put forward by the revolutionary Balbavikian that it's time, quote, to look seriously for solutions outside and beyond this system, end quote, working for a revolution to emancipate humanity. Sunsara was a vital part of founding Refuse Fascism in 2016. Welcome, Coco. Welcome, Sunsara.
Thank you, Sam. Great to be here.
We'll talk at the same time. Hi, Coco. Hi, Sam. Great to be with you guys, and really glad to be with everybody tuning in tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wanted to start, Coco, by asking you a question just to like ground our conversation. Before we get into our main topic that's focused on how do we defeat this, right? I want to hear your thoughts on this continued disbelief that the MAGA nightmare could come to pass. People, I think, still believe that this is all talk. He might want to, but he's never going to be able to do what he hopes to do. I just would like to hear, what are you thinking about that? And why do you think we need to be oriented to defeat them, to defeat Trump and the MAGA fascists, as opposed to waiting and seeing what they do?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I think first, we really need to look at the reality of what they've already done, and they're announcing what they intend to do. And the first Trump term gives us some indications of what he galvanized and cohered, this 21st century virulent American fascism, just dripping with white supremacist, xenophobic, misogynist, um, revenge, violence fueled um, fascist leap. That's what it represented. And, I think too many people are using that the fact that he was defeated in the 2020 election and that, supposedly we survived, you have to ask who's we. Some people did not survive it, but, to hide from what this means that he's coming back into power with a whole army of very powerful, you know, backers and uh, uh, like loyalists, loyal lieutenants who are poised to really take this further than were able to in the first term. They've profoundly, in Trump's first term, they profoundly changed the political landscape. And there's one example: 25 million women have already lost the right to abortion. And we should make no mistake that this is killing women. Um, and, in the first Trump term, there wasn't a Project 2025, a whole program that, a whole host of, very thoughtful, intelligent, and, um, you know, fascist strategists laid out. They have a completely, worked out, thought out program for how to transform every institution of American government. This time, he didn't win the popular vote in 2016. This time he has. Think of what it means for them to have the so-called legitimacy, right, of a popular mandate, under this system. That were, it's not like he was tempering his message. They got behind the most vicious and hateful rhetoric, promising retribution against his enemies, saying immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. These are things straight out of Hitler's playbooks. So that all needs to be taken very seriously. And, we don't have time probably to go through his whole cabinet pick. You referred to it, but it's filled with Christian fascist, biblical literalists, war criminals, white supremacists, male supremacists, science-hating lunatics trying to bring on Armageddon. So they're deadly serious. But I mean, another factor here is that Trump tried to pull off a violent coup on January 6th, 2021, and this did not bar him from coming back to power. So what they've shown and what they're riding high on right now is that the old norms are gone. This was a big part of the first Trump term, tearing up those norms. And the path, as they see it, is free and clear for them to proceed at breakneck speed. And the more we understand and confront this reality, they're already making their moves and they're not even back in the White House yet. So, the more we understand this reality, the more we can act in a way that is commensurate to stop them from implementing their program. So, I guess I'll stop there.
Sansara, was there anything that you wanted to add to what Coco was saying?
I mean, I really agree with what Coco was saying, and also how you opened, Sam. Look, fascism is exactly what you said. It's a qualitative change in the form of rule. And look, America, this system, this country, as much as they proclaim a land of freedom and democracy, this has been a country that since its founding, this is something that Bob Avakian has pointed out very powerfully in his social media messages at Bob Avakian official, especially since the election. This country really is two countries in one. One of the big things that we're told is, look, this time around, the American people voted for Trump. The American people want this. And as Coco said, he won a slight majority of the popular vote. He didn't actually win a majority of the popular vote. He won about 2 million more votes than Harris. but he won actually under a majority of the popular vote. And I think it's really important. The bigger difference in the election, see, now I'm diverting from your question, but I think it's relevant. The bigger difference in this election was that a huge number of people who voted for Biden, voted for the Democrats last election, stayed home and didn't vote at all. Harris lost more votes compared to Biden in the last election than Trump gained. And so that was the bigger decider. Yes, he gained about 2 million votes, but he didn't win the overall majority. And there are millions and tens of millions who did not support this and do not want it and hate everything that Trump represents and concentrates. But we have to be real. So first of all, the American people did not vote for this. Half the country voted for this. A fascist country within this country voted for this and is gung-ho behind it. And just thrilled at what you saw at Madison Square Garden, calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage. Just thrilled about the stuff that Coco was talking about, saying immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country and are getting ready and eager for the biggest mass deportations in American history, using the military, using new camps, threatening to use legal force against mayors and any local law enforcement or elected officials who stand in the way of this mass deportation sweep, to say nothing of the immigrants themselves and anybody who stands with them. This is a full-bore fascist regime who have been building in their program. They have the first regime, like Coco said, under their belt. They have Project 2025 raring to go. They have 4 years since the January 6th attempted coup, where they purged the Republican Party of anybody who stood against them. They've captured the Supreme Court this time. Trump is coming in with a stripped down, fully fascist party, all three branches of government, an unleashed, rabid social base, and he means to carry through exactly what he has promised. And this is a nightmare for humanity. But it's coming out of a country and it's coming out of a system that has had white supremacy, male supremacy, American domination and imperialist expansionism and military aggression and exploitation built into its foundations. And so this is not an aberration, but it is a leap and it is extreme, and it really needs to be confronted for what it is, and it needs to be massively opposed, and it needs to be defeated through mass, nonviolent, massive struggle of millions and millions standing up and refusing to accept it. And then it's very important that we go to the root of it. The system that gave rise to this fascism, a system which is thoroughly outmoded, completely illegitimate. Any system, I mean, it's you know, people are saying, well, Trump was elected this time, he won the popular vote, therefore he's legitimate. No, if your system can, through its own mechanisms, its normal channels, its legal parameters, elect and put in power a full-out fascist, that doesn't tell you he's legitimate. That tells you the system is illegitimate. And so we do need to, as you said, and I'll wind up my first comments with this, as you said in introducing me, Sam, we do need to do exactly what Bob Avakian has said. We need to look seriously for solutions outside and beyond this system. Resistance outside the terms of this system, which we should talk more about what that means, not appealing to, trying to follow the Democratic Party as they make nice with these fascists, but also not just trying to pressure them, actually getting outside their bounds to wage mass struggle. But also beyond this system, in the sense of building for a revolution that overthrows the system and replaces it with a much better system that is not based on all this exploitation, ruthless oppression here and around the world, and is really putting us on the road to real emancipation. So we can talk more about that as well.
Thank you both, and thank you to those who have just joined. Welcome. This is Offense and Defense, how to defeat Trump MAGA fascism and defend those under attack. And if you are watching on YouTube, social media, be sure to share this with others. Same goes if you're tuning in via Zoom webinar. You can still share this with people who you think should be tuning in as well. And if you are listening, I'm sure that you already have lots of questions, thoughts, ideas. Be sure to either comment if you're watching on social media or YouTube, and you can use the Q&A button if you're watching via Zoom to send your questions, thoughts, etc. We want to hear from you. I wanted to just emphasize, that your point Sansara, on the illegitimacy is, I think, really underappreciated and not well understood. That this regime remains illegitimate whether they were voted in or not. Fascism is always illegitimate. And I think that this is just really important that people feel that and act on that illegitimacy. And I forget whether it was you, Coco, or maybe it was both of you, I think, that what repels us, what repels all the decent folk from this MAGA fascism is actually what compels the fascists, to their side. And so I just wanted to underscore those 2 points. And I don't know, Sansar, if you want to take a stab at speaking to this first, but I think a big question for anybody who's, like all the people who are tuning in, and many more, in fact, sick at heart, there's a question of what will it take to actually defeat Trump and the Republic fascists? And, is that even something that's possible?
Well, I just want to pick one further point on the illegitimacy, and then I will speak directly to what you raised, the big question of the night. How do we defeat this? On the illegitimacy, it is true that Trump this time, and look, he was prepared to steal the election. Everybody knows, okay? He made clear if he didn't win, it was cheating, it was no good. He never agreed to accept the election results no matter what. This man wanted to come back to power through whatever means, okay? He did, though, come to power through the quote unquote legitimate channels of the elections in this country. And so does that make him legitimate? I would like to hear anybody make the argument that Hitler should have been accepted in Nazi Germany because he too came to power through legitimate means. He didn't come to power through a coup. He didn't come to power, and neither did Trump this time around. He didn't come to power through breaking the rules. But does that mean that you accept it? Does anybody want to make the argument that they should have accepted Hitler? And no, they're not the exact same, but actually they are worth comparing. And Donald Trump, as opposed to Hitler, is in charge of the most powerful military and dominant force in the entire planet and in human history. And to just take one example of that, you look at that, just the absolutely horrific genocide that has been unending, grinding in Gaza, fueled, funded, backed, defended by Biden and Harris and the entire ruling class of this country. And it's difficult to imagine how that could be a greater horror. You see it live streamed every day. Children dying of hypothermia, on top of the starvation, on top of the bombs, on top of the deprivation, on top of the hospitals being targeted, on top of snipers being found in the bodies of 2-year-olds repeatedly, okay, children. Okay, this is what American doctors and international doctors see over and over again. And what does Trump say? He says, if there's not a hostage release before I come in, you're going to see hell on a whole nother level. This is a man who's putting in Christian fascist crusaders, people who say, Mike Huckabee, there is no such thing as a Palestinian. People who literally are on a mission from God, who don't think women should have the right to divorce. Forget about abortion, not divorce, okay? These are like real serious threat to people around the world and to people in this country. And so it should not be accepted. It's completely illegitimate no matter how it came to power. And it does pose that the mechanisms, the system, the underlying dynamics and nature of the system that would let somebody like this come to power through its normal channels, that's what's illegitimate. As for how we defeat this and stop it, first of all, you have to refuse to accept it. And you can't, I believe it can be defeated, but I also want to say, you don't sit back and go, well, do I think we could do it or not? Are the odds good? Are you going to be somebody who sits back and allows fascism to consume and crush the lives of millions of immigrants, of women everywhere, of LGBT people, of trans youth and trans people generally, of Black people, of we're going to have a violent purge in the inner cities. Trump is going to unleash hell. And so you have to decide that you're not going to go along with that and you're going to fight that. And actually, it's a time, this is something else that Baba Bacon has been stressing. It's a time for righteous anger and revolutionary determination, and people standing up and saying no with courage and defiance and being willing to sacrifice. And you want to know what's going to have the power to stop a fascist America is the tens of millions of decent people in this country, the decent country, when there's two countries in one, the decent country that does not want all this white supremacy and male supremacy and terror against the people of the world and immigrants and destruction of the environment, which the Democrats are neck deep in, but Trump wants to pour gasoline on the fires. I'm sitting here in California, in Los Angeles, and it's just, I mean, it's vivid, the destruction of this planet and the worsening of it. So you have to decide you want to act to stop it, and you have to step out there. And the RevComs are doing protests on January 20th on inauguration day. At the RevComs, we have posted where we're doing these around the country. People should step out and say no. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. People working with Refuse Fascism, people working in other organizations, people on their own need to step out and say no. And through our actions, through the truth that we tell, but also through our actions, our courage, our boldness, our disruptive actions, we need to call forward and rally people's righteous anger at this and their determination not to take it. And then it gets to the point of outside of and beyond this system, what Baba Bacon has emphasized. And he made a very important analysis immediately after the election, where he said, where he made this point about looking for answers and acting outside and beyond the system. And he made the point, look, the fascists in this country have the initiative. And the tens of millions who support Trump have the initiative right now. They have a lot of bluster. They have a lot of boldness. They're riding high. You see them out there doing their Trump trains and other things. And the decent people are profoundly demoralized, disoriented, and they're not acting. And one of the things that Baba Bacon stressed is that as long as you're acting on the terms of this system, the fascists will continue to have the initiative and the decent people will not, for two fundamental reasons. One, the things that the decent people care about, an end to white supremacy, an end to the environmental destruction, the full equality and humanity of women and LGBTQ people being respected and acknowledged, a spirit of cooperation with the people of the world and not domination and plunder. The things that the decent people care about cannot be realized under this system in their fullness. They can be fought for, we can make advances towards it, but they can't be realized because of the nature of this system. So you're going against the grain, whereas everything the fascists are fighting for has its roots in the history and the ongoing functioning of this country and the nature of the system. So that's one reason why we have to go outside the bounds of the system. And the other is that there's no section of the ruling class that will give its backing to the kind of fight it will take to defeat this fascism, because the Democrats, as much as they called it fascism for 5 minutes before the election, their biggest allegiance is to the stability of the system they represent, capitalism, imperialism. That's what they are. That's their biggest allegiance. So they are going to try to corral and suffocate and the people who want to fight this, and they're going to want to lead people to make common ground and stay within the terms of the system as the fascists continue to barrel over all the quote unquote norms, all the not roadblocks, the what's the word they always use? The safety, the guardrails. As they bulldoze over all the quote unquote guardrails of democracy, the Democrats are going to try to corral people and keep them on the terms of the system so the system maintains its stability. And so people need to get outside the terms of the system, outside of Democrat, Republican, outside the electoral terms, into the streets and mass nonviolent struggle. And yes, into getting organized for a revolution that would get beyond this system altogether. Not everybody who resists is going to be for revolution, but more and more people need to confront it's the nature of the system that's fundamentally the problem. And there is a whole different way we could be living if we made a revolution. So we need to be fighting for both of these things. And this starts, it starts today. It starts it goes forward every day, But I think this January 20th inauguration day, it's important that people be out in the streets saying no. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America, and a slogan that we RevComs are raising. The whole system is rotten and illegitimate. We need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system. And I guess, I add one further thing because I realize it needs to be said. I was implying it, but through that kind of struggle, it is possible to create the level of profound political crisis in this country. Not one or two people acting, but beginning with who we have in a way that calls forward. And this is also part of acting outside the terms of the system. You're not protesting to get the Democrats to do something different. You're protesting to wake up and call forward the tens of millions who oppose this to themselves act. And the more that they act in the streets, in the institutions, in the halls of the academia, in the arts, in the public square, in many different realms, the more that those people act repeatedly, the more that we could create the kind of profound political crisis that Trump cannot govern the country and implement his fascist program. That is the goal. Now, that may be possible short of revolution. And if that's possible, we're going to celebrate it, and we RevComs will keep fighting for revolution. It may actually require a revolution to do it. I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody knows. But you have to step forward to fight to stop this from being imposed.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you returned to how this could come to be. And also, I think this is important to paint a picture of what it would take to have the kind of profound crisis that could make that so. I think that unfortunately, even though people have the example of the beautiful and powerful uprising for Black lives in 2020, I think that folks' imagination right now of what not only must be done, for humanity, for the future, but also what we are capable of doing, I think people are quick to lose sight of. Coco, I was hoping to bring you back into the conversation to talk a little bit more about how you see serious opposition. What might that look like? And how can we get started on that right now?
Well, I think, everything that Sansara said was really important. I mean, I think to start from maybe an opposite, one way that's not going to stop it is if we continue to conciliate and, accept this culture of passivity, collaboration, conciliation, thinking that, we're going to be able to convince Trump supporters one by one, by, being nice people to change, and maybe then we'll win the next election. That's completely delusional, and we really need to, have have society erupt in mass defiance, mass refusal at every level, at every, in every corner of society, in every city and town, getting the slogan out, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America, and, joining with the RevComs and getting the second slogan out. All over, right now, there's just so much accepting of what, of this new reality, this new, I guess, normal. So, I think that's step one. And putting all of our sort of creative and moral energy into changing the terms on which people are thinking about this, and changing, like, Sansara was saying, tens of millions of people absolutely hate this. And it is those tens of millions who can clog up and jam up the channels and the pipes to such an extent that Trump cannot govern. And there are examples all over the world of that happening. And even short of even driving out a fascist regime, of making it so that they can't implement their whole program. We should not be satisfied with that. We should want a better world where, this doesn't keep happening and the basis for this fascism is driven out. But, in those tens of millions of people, all of the people here on this, podcast or on this webinar listening, you really are the first people to go out and, challenge this idea that this is something that has to be accepted and that, you, your neighbors or, family members that voted for this or are backing this are, fine people. It, we're not calling for any like acts of revenge or anything. We're talking about like you really have to stand up to it in every way possible. Nonviolent mass protest, mass refusal, and challenging it, and and things. you know, I I'm gonna go out on a limb and say if it weren't for COVID and the mass protests, George Floyd protests, these did have an effect in exposing the fascist program and in leading to that electoral defeat. It wasn't enough, as we can see, like they were able to come back and consolidate, but it's not inevitable. But we really do have to be very clear that this is not something to conciliate with and make peace with.
Thanks, Coco. I don't know, since if there was anything that Coco raised that you wanted to respond to.
I just want to add one
Oh
thing
yeah, go
to
ahead.
say. Well, maybe you were going to ask this later, but you know, since I was talking about the Democrats, I think, relying on the Democrats is a big part of what's gotten us here. The norms have been torn up. Um, uh, and it is really important to, protest against all, any outrage that comes out. But at the same time, this is something that I think characterized the kind of protest in the first term was, there would be an attack on, for example, the family separation came down. And it was very good that people went, they got out and they protested, or when the Muslim ban was announced and people went to the airports and they protested. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize that the fascism is a steamrolling, it's an exercise in blatant dictatorship, and they are able to absorb these, separate acts of opposition. And you do have to actually take on the fascism as a whole and have a movement that goes up against the fascism. I think, maybe we can get into that a little bit more.
I was going to say, Coco, one time, not long ago, you and I were talking and you brought up an example I thought was maybe helpful for people to envision. And I noticed in the question in the chat, people said, "Oh, what are some of the examples around the world?" And you gave an example of resistance to Modi, who is a Hindu fascist in India, and he's not been stopped. He's done a tremendous amount of damage, and he continues to be on the tear. But you gave a really good example of mass protests that prevented him from carrying out a key part of what he was trying to do. Do you want to bring that?
Yes. So, in 2019, Modi in India passed, I think it was a couple of citizenship laws, but one of them was the Citizenship Amendment Act, which would, give preferential citizenship to people who were from, non-Muslims who were coming in as looking for as immigrants or looking for citizenship. And then there was an act that would have taken Muslim refugees off the citizenship rolls. And at the time that this happened, there were two things. One, people did rise up in mass protest. There was a huge student uprising, and there was a farmers protest, and I'm not the total expert on this, but there was a farmers protest that was, it was related to something else, but it really, these created a political crisis. And then COVID broke out and the whole country was shut down, and that put a halt on everything. Now, as my understanding it is, as of March 2024, the act was I don't know, uploaded. But I don't, from what I can tell, all of this, what they were trying to do, not that things are good for Muslims in India, but they were not able to implement it fully, and they still haven't been able to implement it fully. And in fact, Modi lost his majority in that time also. So, it's an example of how, short of driving out a regime, you can stop the implementation of, something that would have, is doing harm, but would have, been catastrophic for millions and millions of people.
Thanks for lifting that up, Coco. I was wondering whether we could talk a little bit more about what going on the offensive means. Um, you know, why since I already spoke to some of this, like, why is that a better strategy than, waiting for elections, or a better strategy than, begging Democratic Party leaders? But if either of you wanted to speak a little bit more to how you see going on the offensive.
Look, I think you go on the offensive politically because it's completely illegitimate and unacceptable. Enslaving women to forced motherhood is unacceptable. It's a horror. There's nothing, your body, my choice, these hyena, rabid, women-hating bros who are just fully unleashed. This is illegitimate. You go on the offensive because it's garbage, it's bad, it's bullshit, it's ugly, it's horrific. You can't stomach it. It's no good. The same with the treating immigrants like they're not human beings. They're like, parents and children go to school and they come home and their parents are missing. Do you know the terror of that? I mean, people who their homelands have been bombed by US imperialism. They've been set on fire by the ravages of climate change, or undergone hurricanes or droughts so that their land is not arable anymore because of climate change. The number one culprit in the world is the US and the US military driving this destruction. Not the only, but the number one. There's nothing legitimate about this. These people are driven from their homelands. They come into this country. They're forced to live in the shadows. They do the worst, most dangerous jobs. They're treated like animals with no rights. And then they're rounded up and deported. There's nothing legitimate about it. And so you go politically on the offense against the whole of it, because there's right and wrong. Because there's what kind of world, what kind of future, what kind of do you want, and what kind of human being are you going to be? It's not just, this is why I'm saying it's not a calculation. You start and say, ooh, well, how do we, the triangulating like the Democratic Party, what's going to sell, what's going to maneuver, well, how are we going to market this? No, you start with what's right and wrong, and what kind of future do you want, and what kind of human being do you want to be? And then you fight for that. You go politically on the offensive because we're right, and because what we're fighting for. The slogan is very powerful: in the name of humanity. We refuse to accept a fascist America. That's an offensive slogan, with tremendous meaning that actually takes the lives and the futures of 8 billion people on this planet and takes them into your hands and into your hearts, and you say, no, we're not letting you do this to the masses of people, into humanity, into the future. And you fight against that in the name of humanity. You find your strength in that, and you give other people strength by standing on that and setting a standard and insisting on it, and saying anything else, what Coco was saying, conciliating, hiding, going for self, that's bullshit. That's complicity. That's good German behavior. That's what they did in Nazi Germany, and we do not look kindly on that for good reason. You have to stand up, and yes, it's going to require courage. It's going to require sacrifice. It's going to require a lot of struggle, but there's something bigger than yourself, and that's what makes life worth living. That's what gives life meaning. You're doing it for something bigger than yourself, and it's possible to defeat this. So you step out there in the name of humanity, and we refuse to accept a fascist America, because you confront the truth of what this is. If you hide from it, it doesn't change it. It will come for you, whether you want to confront it or not. It will come for humanity, whether you want to confront it or not. So you have to name it, you have to call it out, you have to stand against it. And through doing that, yes, through speaking, but also through acting, you set a standard, and you plant a pole, and you provide an anchor for others to step forward. That's how every social movement has begun. You have to get out there. You have to get out there when nobody else will. There are tens of millions who hate this. There are tens of millions who could become complicit. There's tens of millions who could go along, or there are tens of millions who could be rallied to stand up. And what we do is going to be decisive in influencing that. Yes, other things will influence it too, but this is where we have cards to play. We have to step out there and call it out offensively. At the same time, there's got to be defensive people who are under attack. Here in California, they've begun ICE raids. I mean, they've done them before, but they unleashed this in the last week in the midst of the fires and all the dislocation. They have ICE rounding people up. We got the word that in Bakersfield, it's near a lot of the agricultural farmland in California, which is huge amount of agricultural output for the whole country. With a lot of migrants and immigrants working there, many undocumented. And ICE showed up at a taqueria breakfast spot where the laborers were eating breakfast, and just started grabbing people out of the gas station, out of the taqueria, throwing them against the wall, saying, "Give me your papers." And they just grabbed people, put them in vans, and kidnapped them and disappeared them. I mean, straight up disappeared them, human beings. And very correctly, people, immigrant rights groups and social media influencers and others called blew the whistle and said, "Get out here, people come out here." And from all over, hundreds of people were showing up all day. We got, not myself, but other RevComs got in the car, drove up there and stood with people. We need to be defending those, putting our bodies between the attacks by the illegitimate forces of the fascist state or from fascist thugs, and defending the rights and the lives of the people, saying, no, you can't get away with this. That's how you create a fighting people. You defend the rights and the lives of the people, but you're overall going on offense against the entirety of it. And Coco's right. You have to call out the fascism, and you have to call it out as a whole and say, no, we refuse to accept this. Because if all you do is defense, then you are defending this little thing and this little thing and this group of people. As righteous as it is, the entire juggernaut is bulldozing forward, and you're defending on shrinking ground, and you're doing rear guard, doomed to eventually be consumed actions. But in the context of going offensively against the whole of it, you have to defend people and build up that strength, and make every single incident a two-sided incident. And then you also, on this offense, we really have to go offensively against the whole system that gave rise to this. A system that is already burning the planet, a system that where it is, Democrat and Republican. There's not a major political party in this country that is not 100% neck deep in the blood of the people of Palestine, eagerly, enthusiastically cheerleading and backing a genocide. There's not a party in this country. I mean, what was the debate between Harris and Trump? No, I'm gonna frack more. No, she's not gonna frack. No, I'm gonna frack. I want to frack. Oh, I'm gonna drill. No, I've actually expanded drilling more than anybody. I mean, this was the debate. Who's destroying the planet more rapidly? You know, who's gonna crack down on immigrants more severely? Who's gonna back the Israel more to the hilt? You know, these are the debates. This is an illegitimate system. That reflects the system more deeply. And I think we have to go offensive against that as well and get organized to bring it down. And in this regard, I want to announce somebody asked in the questions as well, who are the RevComs? It stands for Revolutionary Communists, and we are followers of Bob Avakian and the new communism that he has forged. He's the architect of a whole new framework of human emancipation, as well as somebody who's lived an incredible life of commitment, struggle, revolutionary contributions since the 1960s. Tomorrow night on the Revolution Nothing Less show, we have a very special broadcast at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/the RevComs with a very important New Year's message from Bob Avakian, which I guarantee is going politically and ideologically on the offensive against this fascism and against the system, and bringing alive very powerfully a whole different way we could be living and how we fight for it now. So I think that's also going to be an extraordinary episode, an extraordinary tool, and something I really think people should tune in to, and will provide a lot of anchor and leadership for how we need to conduct this struggle in this period.
Thanks, Sansara. And Coco, I wanted to bring you back in, and I'm gonna give you choices. There's always choices, right? To either speak to what one thing that I've seen in people's questions is, okay, well, what does that look like? I've never done something like this before. How do I act, especially when so few are acting right now? What can I do tomorrow, this week, next week? So if you wanted to speak to that, or if you wanted to speak to more of what kind of defense you see as needed, as being actions that people should take to defend those under attack. Um, Sorry that was so articulate the first time around, especially in regards to immigrant communities, but other dimensions of defense that you see worthy of, putting people's attention to. So either of those.
Well, I'll speak to the first one. If you are in, one of the major cities like DC or New York or Chicago, Austin, there are going to be protests, called for by different groups. And, RevCom cores are for the emancipation of humanity are calling protests that are manifesting the two slogans in the name of humanity. We refuse to accept a fascist America. This whole system is rotten and illegitimate. We demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system. But, there are maybe other protests as well that you can, hook into and find. And, I think those are even beyond the big cities. But, if you're by yourself, or you have, you have a few friends who hate this shit, or, you have a social media account, just pull together some people, go to a corner, have some picket signs, have a banner, go to a city council meeting or something, and stand up and say, look, everybody, we have to oppose this fascism. What they're calling for, doing in the immigrant neighborhood, that's unacceptable. People need to speak up. We're gonna have to find some courage to go and speak up in various places. And, actually, I'll just say that yesterday I was at the Texas Capitol, and there was a very polite little, a polite protest outside, or, a gathering of the decent people. These are people who really value diversity, do not want LGBT people to be, pushed back into the closet. They don't want immigrants rounded up. But inside the Capitol, it was teeming with these, with fascists, Christian fascists, Trump MAGA fascists. And if a few of us went in there and we, called out a message very loudly. We gave, a award of fascist distinction to the Texas legislature. But, it wasn't hard to get a few people and go in and do something like that. Use your creativity, and go just act out. I would say that's how you start. Yeah, maybe so, since RF wants to speak to the defense point, or I could try to answer that, but I would say there are, getting started can be easier than you think.
Yeah, I don't want to add much to what Coco said. That people are, if you have a determination, you can find a lot of creative ways. The only thing I want to add right now is to underscore once again the power of the slogan as a unifier. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Coco, you mentioned get out there with a few picket signs, and I agree. Put that on them. Do a banner drop that says that. Raise this slogan that the RevComs are raising. The whole system is rotten and illegitimate. We need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system, and learn about that as you do. And then unite with, learn about it. Go to revcom.us. We have a whole statement that lays out what's possible if we made a revolution, as it's been re-envisioned by Bob Avakian. There's a different way we could be living. It's not necessary to live in a world that, we really can't afford to let them continue to rule, these imperialists. The planet will not survive. Humanity might not survive. We have to get serious about bringing the system down and replacing it with something far different. So you can get connected with the RevComs at revcom.us and get organized for revolution as we stand together with everybody from different perspectives to stand up and raise the slogan, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. And that has power, and that can bring people together from very different outlooks, perspectives, issues that you come around. And it's actually what's required for any of us to succeed in getting the future that any of us want, is unity around that and mass struggle around that. So, that can show up on picket signs, on banner drops, on stickers, on stencils, on t-shirts. You can, it can pop up in the middle of a fascist press conference and get some media attention. One or two people can do that on your own. It can have a big effect. It can, there's all kinds of ways to do this. And somebody said it's easier if it's already happening. That's true, but you know what? It's easier for others if you start it, if it's not started already.
Such an important point. And just to do a little plug, if you want a t-shirt that does have the slogan on it, you can go to refusefascism.org and find, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. That's just one of the many ways in which you can be putting this demand, planting this demand with your body out in the real world. We have so many really, really thoughtful questions that have come in, and I want to thank everybody for sending them in. We're gonna, in just a moment, be getting to some of those questions. And if we don't get to your question tonight, that doesn't mean that we won't get to your question. I'll be looking over them with the podcast team, and we will hopefully speak to your question, if not tonight, sometime soon. So please continue to send in your questions. I want to start with a question that came in before tonight's program started. Someone sent it in when they registered, and as I'm looking at other people's questions, it's one that many people share. So Tracy from Georgia wrote, "All seems so hopeless at this point in America. It seems like the only thing we can do is wait for MAGA folks to sour on Trump, etc., and realize they've been duped. hopefully in future elections, we can gain back some representation. And I was wondering if either of you would want to speak to that, or I can read out a few questions and you can respond to what you want.
You want to speak, Coco?
I mean, I think I think if you are thinking in terms, if that the only way to deal with this is within the terms of the system is through elections, then yeah, things are looking pretty hopeless. If we wait for, the mass base to sour on Trump. One, there's no guarantee that that would happen. And two, it will be far too late, because they will have, steamrolled over entire populations of people. So, but there is hope. There is hope in the tens of millions of people who hate this, but it is not going to be we really have to challenge ourselves to break, the chains on our imagination, of how, look at South Korea, people rose up not for the first time to drive out their, someone who tried to implement martial law. And now, that my understanding is that person's been arrested or, questioned. There, you have to break outside of those confines. Within those confines, it is going to be very, very, if there's hope, it's going to be misplaced. So I'm sure Tunsara has more to say about this question, but
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what you're saying. Two things. First, the Democrats and the elections are not a vehicle for positive change or for fundamental change. And so waiting for the elections it's wrong on two levels, but I want to speak fundamentally. The elections are about who gets to rule a system of exploitation and oppression, and who gets to be determined to be a legitimate candidate, what issues are considered legitimate, what are the parameters of politics set within the ruling structures and ruling elections, are all on the terms of the system. They're all on the terms of the system. They are not on the terms of the fundamental interests and needs of humanity. And this is why, as a very sharp concentration, when you had the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, you literally had, and we did a mashup of them bragging back and forth on the Revolution Nothing Less show during the debate on the environment. He attacked her for being for the environment and against fracking and against drilling. And she said, no, 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 I'm for drilling and I'm for fracking. And she said, and she bragged, and it's true that Biden and Harris opened up more drilling in the US and made the amount of extraction of fossil fuels in this country greater than it's been in the history of this country. That's the record of the Democrats. And then you have the record of and the promise of the Republicans saying we're going to open up even more drilling. We're going to even more accelerate the burning of our planet. And we are really at this. The last 10 years have been the hottest 10 years in the history of records. And the last year was the hottest, and literally Los Angeles is burning down, and it's not going to abate. This is going to worsen. So that's on the terms of why, because the system needs the ruthless pursuit of profit. The environment is an externality to that. It needs the energy dominance for not just for consumption in this country, but for domination against rival imperialist powers. That's the system that is antagonistic to the needs and the interests of the people. Also, you had the debate over immigration. And what did Kamala Harris say? She said, well, why are you attacking us on immigration? We tried to pass a super fascist anti-immigrant law written by one of the most extreme fascist Republicans, and Trump torpedoed it because he wanted to play politics. She did not say, look, we need to end the domination and oppression that's driving people from their homelands. We need to treat undocumented people like full human beings with rights and humanity. She did not take on Trump saying they're poisoning the blood of the country. He should not take on his lies about Haitians eating the dogs and the cats. She sat there and she chuckled. Like, oh, this is so absurd. We all know we're cracking down on immigrants. And then Trump went straight Nazi on it. So you have the spectrum of debate. Why? Because this system actually cannot absorb all these people who've been coming. They need them for their exploitation, for their economy, but they also need, they're afraid of the breakdown of the cohesion of this country and of the other imperialist countries, because more and more imperialism is devastating the what's called the global south. Huge swaths of land are no longer arable. There's massive desertification, turning into deserts, what used to be arable agricultural land, people being driven off their lands. There's wars of domination and plunder, reactionary wars. There's civil wars breaking out because of the domination and the footprint of imperialism across Africa and other places. And so people are being driven from their homelands. There's economic ruin, again, driven by imperialism, most of all the US imperialism. There's the proliferation of gangs and violence, once again, driven by the US, very literally. The gangs in El Salvador, many of them came from the US and the people were deported back, and that's how they took root in El Salvador in the first place. This is like, but that's built into the system. Democrats, Republicans are not debating how to end that. They're debating how to crack down more ruthlessly. And yes, one side is fascist, but they're both bound by the interests of the system. I will not go through the other things where they are, they're differences of degree. They're differences that matter for the lives of people. Fascism is worse in qualitative ways, but they are differences of degree of the same system. And that's all you're ever going to get through the electoral process, whether it be on questions of domination and plunder of the world, on the environment, on immigration, on questions of mass incarceration and police terror. You're going to get differences of degree. You're not going to get an end to these things through electoral terms, number one. That's one reason why you're not going to, the interests of the people will never contend and be realized through the elections. You have to get outside the elections and wage mass resistance and struggle. And fundamentally, you need a different system. You need to bring this system down and institute a system that takes all the resources, all the people, all the technology, all the know-how that exists and puts it to use for the common good and the benefit of humanity, which is totally possible under a different system, a different state power. Bob Avakian's written a constitution for how we would do it. Education, media, all of it. But so that's one reason the elections are not the arena. But the other reason why we can't wait in the way that Tracy was asking is the Trump people are not going to wake up. They're not going to come to see it's not really working for them. And this is a very profound point that people need to confront about the nature of this country and why Bob Avakian has said there are two countries within this country, and it goes back to its founding. At the time of the founding of this country, there were two countries that continued through the Civil War, which was fought over white supremacy and slavery, didn't get resolved. It continued through the 60s, where this country ripped wide open on questions of what? White supremacy, imperialist domination and plunder in Vietnam and elsewhere, oppression and degradation of women. Just right down the middle, and soon on LGBT rights after that. Also, environmental questions started to emerge. This two countries in one, there is a country of people, half this country, who have been socialized, ideologically shaped by the white supremacy that is poured into the foundation of this country and continues to exist. And they are the same people who generations ago came out and watched lynchings of Black people by the, like a spectator sport. They had picnics, they made postcards of the lynchings and they sent them around like it was a carnival. This was a mass pastime in this country. There is a socialized people. It's why I said they thrilled at the Madison Square Garden, rally. They weren't offended. They weren't turned off by the racism there. That appealed to them. So there's a section of people who this works for them, even if they're first of all, most of Trump's base is not economically desperate. They are better off. Most of them are. They're a higher economic demographic overall. But even the people who have lost their jobs or been dislocated because of globalization, they are being rewarded by the sense of the good old reassertion of white male dominant patriarchy and superiority. And that's what Make America Great Again means. And that ideological reward is actually fueling people, even if they're not doing economically well, some of them. And that is not going to wear off. That has to be challenged. When that started to break down and lost initiative, and some people started to defect from that in the history of this country, was when it was one time was during the Civil War. Some people doubled down and fought to defend slavery, but more and more people got disaffected by it when people raised the banner against it. But also during the 60s, during the civil rights movement, and then in the 60s, when this got forcibly challenged through struggle, you started to break away some people, mostly youth. Again, many people doubled down and reinforced the white supremacy, the male supremacy, all of that. But it had to be defeated, is my point. It has to be defeated. And it's through defeating it that you have a chance to start to peel people away from the ideological coherence of it. So that's the other reason you can't just go through the elections and wait it out. You know, A, the elections are not the arena that the people's interests can be realized in. B, you're never going to, those people aren't going to disaffect organically. It has to be challenged. And I will say, C, third reason, we do not have time, given how rapidly Trump is promising to move starting day one.
Thanks, Sansara. I want to shout out the people who are listening on Zoom, but also who are joining on YouTube, on Facebook, on our Instagram. Good to have you with us. I'm taking in your questions too. I do want to speak to just lift up again, because some people are leaving, have to go on to other things that are going on. I thank those folks for joining us. And I do want to say that in the chat, Sansara put in, I think, information about some upcoming events that the RNL show and the Revcoms are hosting, protests that they've called for. And there are, as Coco mentioned earlier, there are a lot of other groups doing things. There's also there's the People's March that's happening on Saturday that people should bring in the name of humanity. We refuse to accept a fascist America into. There's also a lot of actions that are happening on Inauguration Day because it's MLK Day. And people should bring this message, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America, into those events as well. And those are things that are easy to find. But I just wanted to lift those up before I return to some other questions and resources on signs you can print, banners you can print that have the slogan can be found at refusefascism.org under resources. So if people are looking for something like that, you can go there. I have a lot of other good questions. I did want to speak to the hopelessness that Tracy mentioned. And Coco spoke to, if you're thinking only through politics as usual, only through, working to pressure the Democrats, or working to beg the courts to do something, it is pretty hopeless. So I really appreciate that and think that that's true. I also think that one of the things that we have working for us is how detested this regime is. And you cannot always see it out on the surface, because we see the streets empty, but that doesn't mean that disgust, that hatred of everything that Trump and MAGA are about isn't real. And how do you go from, people have written, I've seen comments being like, we're lazy, Americans are lazy. How do you get these lazy people? And part of when people, a big part of when people decide to put something on the line is when they think that that sacrifice, that risk is going to mean something. And they do that when they see the possibility for their defeat, right? And they also do that when they think they can't live another day with the regime doing what they're doing. I mean, you think about uprisings that, to me, I look and I'm just in absolute awe of the women in Iran
Yeah.
that stood up and continue to stand up and risk arrest, torture, the possibility or even death, um, to fight for their lives and their humanity. And they were joined by others. And they put something on the line because they decided that they couldn't live another day under theocratic rule. And I think that it's on all of us to inspire, provoke, compel the decent people to feel that too, to feel that they cannot live another day with the threat of a truly fascist regime that imperils humanity and the planet itself, that they feel that they cannot stand aside while immigrants are terrorized, while women and LGBTQ people are slammed backwards, that feel they cannot live another day with Trump being able to wage like nuclear war on the world. Like that is intolerable. I think that is something that we have the ability to provoke, inspire, compel people, um, and through our actions to show what is possible. And that takes creativity, that takes courage, but that's how we overcome the hopelessness. People stand up when they see others standing up, and we have to be brave enough to be first. So I just wanted to put that in there. I
People stand up when they see other people standing up just because you're pushing on.
Yeah, go. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, I want to say that's true. That is absolutely true. That's what we saw in 2020 in the George Floyd uprising, the beautiful rising against the police torture murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. Um, there have been many thousands of killings of Black and brown people by police before George Floyd. There have been thousands since. It continues to go on. So we need to go further than what happened there. But what made that unique? Yes, it was the particularly horrific killing of George Floyd, but it was also the fact that people stood up immediately in Minneapolis with such power and righteousness that all over the country, finally the dam broke. The feelings of millions that have been suppressed came to the fore, and it was very powerful, and people should not forget what we accomplished. There was 15 million people in the streets, at least, repeatedly, in the face of rubber bullets, in the face of threats, in the face of tear gas, in the face of, I think almost 24 people were killed, gave their lives standing up, killed by vigilantes, killed by law enforcement, killed by, this was a very serious thing, and people did it heroically, and this did shake the entire world. I mean, people all over the world saw it. Donald Trump was driven into his little bunker. I mean, the Mark Milley had to get the joint chief of staff had to come out and apologize for standing with Trump. This actually is an example of how you create conditions where the rulers cannot govern in the normal way and cannot go forward with their program. Trump wanted to use the military to shoot people in the knees and worse, and he asked for it. And because of the force of what people were doing standing up, Yes, non-violently, overwhelmingly. The violence was on the side of the law enforcement and the vigilante fascist thugs like Kyle Rittenhouse and the rest, but mainly non-violently standing up, but with power and mass numbers and determined resistance more than once, not once and going home, but again and again. That created a situation where the rulers were back on their heels. The fascists were on the defensive and they had to scramble to regain legitimacy, and they couldn't go forward for a time. Now, it was channeled into dead ends. People had the illusion they're going to defund the police, which will never happen under this system. It was a silly and wrong-headed, harmful solution people got channeled into. There was a lot of, I'm going to say it, woke identity politics, misleadership, followed people just because they're this identity or that identity, rather than looking at the content of what they're saying and what's really the problem and what will really get to the solution. So there were problems with it. It didn't go far enough, but it shows you the power. And those people are still out there. And there are still millions and millions in this country, tens of millions, who are furious, who are livid. Yes, about the women who are dying for lack of abortion, but also by the lives that are mangled, the women who are enslaved by being forced to have children against their will, which is hundreds of thousands at this point. The terror that hangs over every woman and girl living in those states right now, and the threat that is coming for women everywhere else. There's millions who hate this. So there are the people who can come forward. If you stand up, you give others the courage to stand up. That starts, you don't have a guarantee they'll follow you, but you do have to stand up and fight for that. But I want to add something to this, because hope also comes from when you scientifically understand that this is not necessary to put up with. It's wrong to have people mistreated. Fascism is wrong, but it's also unnecessary, and the system is unnecessary. And this is when you scientifically understand that the material basis exists in the world today for everybody on this planet to live a rich life, not only materially where their needs are met, food, clothing, and shelter, but also culturally, socially, intellectually, to be a part of a collective, cooperative, interesting, and diverse shared existence. The only thing standing in the way is a system of capitalism, imperialism, with its armies and its enforcement of the world the way it is. When you know it's possible for it to be different, that is also a source of hope. And it's not just an idea, it's scientifically grounded. Just as it is scientifically grounded that there are enough people who are opposed to this, that if they stood up and acted and fought with some determination and courage and persistence, no, there's not a guarantee, but there is a fighting chance to defeat this fascism. And so on this point, and it connects to why I say, people had the illusion in 2020 with all the strength that we have to remember and root ourselves in of that. And the reality, like you were saying, Sam, when people stand up, it gives others the strength to stand up. There was also the understanding that needs to be deepened and changed. Because if people think all it's going to take is you stand up once and you defund the police, and then that doesn't happen, then you get demoralized and disoriented. But if you understand it's going to take a revolution, it's going to take bringing the system down and building a different kind of system and how that could be done, then you have the clarity to see your way through the obstacles. And again, so I want to, in this light, really say again, in terms of hope, there is this statement from Bob Avakian tomorrow on the Revolution Nothing Less show at youtube.com/therevcoms is going to bring a scientific basis for hope, a scientific understanding of the problem and the solution, and what he is doing in an ongoing way at Bob Avakian Official on his social media and in his whole body of work to develop a strategy for revolution, which didn't exist before the work he did, and leadership on defeating this fascism, which he stands out on, but also a vision and a framework for how we would build a new society, a revolutionary society that learns from the best of the past of the revolutions, but actually goes further in some fundamental ways and different in ways that people need to know about. The more that people know this, both all of you listening today by tuning in, but also contributing to getting this known throughout society, this vision Bob Avakian has brought forward, the strategy he's brought forward, the message he's giving tomorrow night, even as you're making up your mind and learning more about it, what you really think about all of it, the more that this is out there, that there's a different way we could be living, the more it's going to lift people's sights and give them the backbone and the determination to stand up and sacrifice, because there's something good on the other side. There's not just a no to the horrors, which is important. There's also something positive, a profoundly positive way forward in the face of very real challenges, which is actually the part of the title of the message he's giving tomorrow night. A profoundly positive way forward in the face of very real challenges and dangers.
I have some comments that I want to bring in addition to, I hope, maybe one more question we can squeeze in, if that's all right. I do want to also put, back in terms of people standing up and what it can inspire. And people looking for, okay, well, concretely tell me something that I can do. I don't know if people saw the disruption that occurred yesterday during the confirmation hearings for Christian fascist Pete Hegseth, but three, I believe they were all vets, disrupted this hearing, and I think that people should go on. I think you can find it on Code Pink's Instagram. It's probably elsewhere as well, and see it and think about what you could do. Won't be a confirmation hearing, but there are opportunities that are going to present themselves, and I think that people should be thinking of what they can do to bring disruptions that also bring in this slogan, right? In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. And in terms of people understanding what it is we face and what's necessary and how do we refuse fascism? I will shamelessly say, people should listen to and share the Refuse Fascism podcast. Someone wrote, well, I'm in a nursing home. What can I do to help? Well, one thing that you can do is share this podcast. Share it through your listening app. Share it by rating and reviewing wherever you listen to podcasts. Comment on YouTube or social media. It really makes a difference, and it's a strength that we have this now. We didn't have it at the beginning of the first Trump term, so I think that I just wanted to put that out there. And I wanted to share two more thoughts from people that were listening. One person wrote, I have to go. This is very helpful. Taking the nonviolent offensive is key. Commit to once a day or a week. Take a stand, even if it's simply standing up at social work or family gatherings. We have someone else that wrote, the In the Name of Humanity slogan is so amazing and inspiring. I'm going to fast signs and have a banner made up to take out in my gateway city. So I just wanted to put some of what people are thinking off of listening into the mix. They might give you ideas of things that you want to do. Okay, last question. How this I thought was an interesting question. So we'll end with this one. One person, this was through Instagram, is wrestling with I'm not going to quote it word for word. I hope that's okay, dear listener. Wondering, this is a huge country. How do you mobilize the kind of like shut it all down action that could compel a political crisis with a country so big, comparing it to, some of the places where tyrants have been driven out have been smaller, and they're wondering, it doesn't really seem possible to bring everybody to the capital in the same way that things like this work in other countries. And if you had any thoughts to, what it could look like.
I think that we don't know, and you can't predict. But I think one thing is we should definitely not be stereotypical in our vision. I don't think the only way that this could happen is through people amassing in the Capitol. That's one way that it could happen. That's one way that it's happened around the world. You know, you can imagine for people who remember the Arab Spring and the uh, outpouring in Tahrir Square in Egypt, or the example in South Korea where people literally go in one place and stay. There's other examples like this around the world where people converge and it's one place and they stay and they stay and they stay. And that's very positive when people are fighting for something right. They've done that before for reactionary causes, but when they're fighting for something right, that's very positive. But I think this country, it is big. It is spread out. And you know, the division is not like it was in the Civil War with one, side all in the north and one side in the south. There is more of a concentration of fascism in the south, but there tends to be more of an urban-rural divide. But even that is not absolute, and it's mixed throughout the population around the whole country. So I think this is where thinking about something like 2020 and the beautiful rising that followed the police murder of George Floyd is very instructive. It's not that it'll repeat exactly like that. It's not that that had everything we need. But that was a situation where people stood up with such force. It didn't start in the Capitol, it started in Minneapolis. They stood up with such right on their side, such conviction, and such not calculating the odds or trying to make nice. I saw somebody in the comments say, does standing on the corner and yelling refuse fascism, will that alienate some people who maybe don't know that this is fascism or are not ready to go there? Well, you know what it does? It wakes people up. It attracts those who are ready to say it, who are seething. And there are thousands and millions like that out there in society. You have to attract those who are ready to stand up first. And then, yes, for other people, it'll circulate in their mind and they'll feel uncomfortable and they'll think about it and then they'll go back and forth. But they'll start to relate to something different. And the fact is, it is fascism. So you have to get people confronting that. And if it makes them uncomfortable at first, that's fine. Better they be uncomfortable on the road to understanding what they need to know and relating to it and standing up around it than comfortable going along with the nightmare and letting the nightmare consume humanity. The problem is right now we need to get people out of their comfort zone. So we have to stand against the grain and go out there and call them forward. But back to 2020, we should remember there was protests in all these little places in quote unquote red states, quote unquote Trump country, places that were majority white with just a few thousand people, towns that were majority white with just a few thousand people in the deep South who came out for Black Lives. And I'm not talking about the organization Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about the actual valuing of Black lives who are systematically terrorized, brutalized, cut down, and killed again and again and again by law enforcement through mass incarceration, and the police are almost never found guilty. And so, yes, people stood up. And there was a phenomenon around the country of people, going to get their Confederate tattoos removed, people who never thought about what they meant and were learning about this. There was all these articles about a mass phenomenon around the country, tattoo parlors saying, we're going to give free tattoo removals for anybody who wants to remove their tattoos. And it was a mass phenomenon. I'm just giving one example. There was a lot of examples. Remember the wall of moms in Seattle that came out at a certain point? The police were attacking, and it was the youth out there. And then finally, all the moms came out with vests on and said, you're going to have to come through us to get to our kids. And then the dads came out with the leaf blowers to blow back what was it, the tear gas? I mean, this was like, these weren't the people the moms were not the ones who stood up first. Some moms did. I'm not dissing moms, but I'm just saying that wall of moms was several layers in. After things had gone and grown and spread, and part of how things go is you stand up, you get isolated, you get attacked, you face repression, and then you have to rally again in the face of that and use that standing up in the face of that and exposing that to call forward even more people and say, hey, why'd you come down on them? They were saying what was right. Get people off the sidelines. That's the process. You stand up, then there you get attacked, then you have to come back and rally more people and use every attack to rally more people to your defense and to stand up for what's right. And that's where the, you know, by analogy, historically, that's where the moms came in. That's where the dads came in. That's where then you start to affect the institutions. And we should understand we are in a time when there is, you know, there's, because it's the last question, I want to weave this in. Pete Hegseth, people were asking about this too. Pete Hegseth, a Christian fascist, woman hating, white supremacist crusader who has championed war criminals. He auditioned for this role by defending people who had been, you know how horrific and openly horrific you have to act to be convicted in the US of carrying out war crimes in their military? Do you know how routine war crimes are in the US military? To be convicted for it, you have to really have acted in a very heinous way that was very well documented. And so what did Pete Hegseth do? There was very rare cases where this happens. He campaigned to get convicted war criminals pardoned, and Donald Trump pardoned them. And so he has campaigned in this way to say, let's take the gloves off. Okay, US has already done torture all over the world, but he doesn't even want it to be nominally, formally forbidden. He wants people to be able to shoot with no cause, you know, all kinds of torture and rape and other things that have been carried out. He says, yeah, take the gloves off. Okay, this guy is being confirmed. Now, the US military has always been an institution of enforcement of brutal oppression and US domination around the world. But when you have a lot of people in it who believe that they're doing something right and just, and here comes Pete Hegseth, who is saying, no, we're going on a Christian crusade, and they think, oh, we're supposed to be a secular institution. You know, some of them are going to love it, but some of them are not going to like it. And he's a racist, and he's saying, get the women out and get the LGBT people out and all this. You're going to have a lot of people who are in the military who are really troubled by that. You're going to have people in the institutions, every institution, in academia, in the State Department, in definitely in the CDC and the health NIH. You're going to put RFK as a science denier in charge of the NIH and the CDC and all the health services. You're going to have a lot of friction within the institutions. If you have people standing up, you start to exacerbate the potential for splits in the institutions too, which has big implications for revolution, but also for defeating this fascism. And in this regard, I'll just bring to bear one final example from 2020 because it gets you thinking. The extremeness of what Trump is going to do is actually what provides the basis, if we act, to wake up and move millions, including potentially as we act and stand up with greater and greater strength, splitting some of these institutions and making it impossible for him to govern and to implement his fascism. In 2020, in the face of these righteous protests, you had a situation where when they called out the National Guard in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of articles about how the Black National Guardsmen were ashamed to tell their families that they were in D.C. to put down the Black Lives protests. And you had some disaffection there. Or you think about something like January 6th insurrection with the Trump people and the law enforcement and the divisions within the law enforcement that started to emerge in the face of that. You have don't underestimate how deeply divided this country is, all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom. And we can't rely on the institutions. We can't rely on the political leadership in the Democratic Party. But if we act, these divisions can be exacerbated in a way that will be favorable if we continue to act and to say, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America and make that a mass dividing line in society. And increasingly, growing numbers thinking outside the system, checking out, learning about, and joining with the RevComs, becoming followers of the new communism of Bob Avakian, who's brought it forward, to fight for a revolution that brings this system down, seizes on these divisions, brings this system down, and replaces it with a system and a future that would actually allow people to have a decent life, a flourishing life, and give us a fighting chance to save this planet before it is too late.
As we close out, I want to give Coco you an opportunity to come back in one more time and share any remaining thoughts, things that have been on your mind, any last words that you have with our audience.
Well, I've just been reading some of the comments, and I think, this kind of deep engagement in, I'm sure you've heard some things that are, challenging you or that you've never heard before. And I think that is really important right now to, look to, the resources that are there. Spread that slogan, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept fascist America. Somebody wrote, this is an amazing slogan. Yes, it is. And I just want to reiterate, Sansara's point that we cannot underestimate how divided this country is. In every town, I don't care how, quote unquote, red or Republican, you know, these fascists say rural America is. It's not. It's really, it doesn't take that much to dig beneath the surface and find that there are many, many people who actually don't want this. And, maybe they don't know that something else is out there, but a lot of them do. And a lot of them are as disgusted with all this as people in, the coastal areas or whatever, the blue strongholds. It is, very much like Sansara was saying, the Baba Vacuum quote, two countries in one. And that's actually, that can be transformed into a strength in such a big country. I actually think it would have to be everywhere. It would have to be, not concentrated. I'm not making any predictions or anything, but, I think it probably would have to be a different model, but it's extremely possible to inspire and unleash those millions of people all over the country to stand up against this and create the kind of political crisis that's needed. And I really enjoyed looking at the questions and hearing everybody's comments as well as listening to um, the discussion.
Thanks for that, Coco. I forgot to mention after Sansara had talked about this before, there's a really thought-provoking interview that I did. We uploaded it December 8th. It's with Brittany with oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the organization and I don't want to say it wrong, but she's a veteran and it's on refusing Trump's orders, military resistance to mass deportation. You can find it on our website, or About Face is the name of the group that she's with. Again, it's refusing Trump's orders, military resistance to mass deportation. It is really, really worth listening to. It's really thought-provoking. You can find it on our website under the podcast tab or wherever you get your podcasts. I want to, close out by first thanking Coco and Sansara for taking the time to chat with me, with us, to work with us on these very, very important questions.
Well, thank you, Sam. This was really good to do, and please extend our best wishes to Faisal too.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank everyone listening and being part of this conversation for, really rich questions and comments, and keep it coming. We'll speak to them in the future in different forms. So thank you for all tuning in and sharing your questions, your deep engagement. Sansara put resources in the chat. I'm not sure if Coco did, but I know that I did some, I hope. If you want to support more programs like this and the podcast, you can chip in at refusefascism.org and hit that donate button, or become a patron at patreon.com/refusefascism. Everyone who said we need more of this, I agree. So please, please chip in so that we can do more of this. And if you learned something during this conversation, let us know about it. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We are going to have a new upload on Sunday. You're not going to want to miss it. So be sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss an episode. You can catch me and the Refuse Fascism podcast every Sunday. You can search for Refuse Fascism wherever you get your podcasts, or sign up at refusefascism.org to get them in your inbox each week. Again, please donate to support this move. Wanted to just remind us all that we find our power together, not by finding a way to get by or accommodate to the new horrific normal, but by together paving a path for mass nonviolent non-cooperation, mass nonviolent disobedience. No, it won't be without risk or sacrifice, but it will be worth putting skin in the game to wrench the future from these fascist hands. So with that, I want to say good night. Take this slogan out in the world and show us how you're doing it. We want to hear about it. Post it on social. You do a banner drop, you do stencils, you do an action in your city. Take pictures, tag us, let us know about it. Send me an email, Samantha Goldman at refusefascism.org. We want to know, we want to share it with others. And any ideas that you have, we want to hear them. With that, good night. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Oh, people asked, sorry, I'm going to end it weird. People asked if there will be a recording. Yes, there will be. You will be able to find it on our YouTube page under lives. We'll leave it up. We'll probably run some excerpts of this in future episodes of the podcast as well. So thanks, everyone.